Hello everyone and welcome to my senior big board, The Inner Force, Pedagogy to Cultivate the Genuine Self. To start off with a friendly introduction, what did you hate about school? Did you think there was too much homework? Did you think that the structure of moving from class to class, the classes not necessarily have anything to do with each other, didn't make sense? Did you feel that the work you were assigned didn't have anything to do with real life? No matter what problems you experienced in school, it's a definite fact that those are not facts of life. Education, just like all other human structures, can be changed and should be changed due to certain problems that I've observed in public education over the course of my research. I want you to consider this quote by Maria Montessori. "The jockey offers a piece of sugar to his horse before jumping into the saddle. The coachman beats his horse that he may respond to the signs given by the reins. And yet neither of these runs so superbly as the free horse of the plains." What does this mean? First of all, this metaphor is a metaphor for people, for children specifically, in schools. Prizes and punishments are the system used by schools to control children's behavior. The prize is usually a good grade, and the punishment is usually a bad grade. But should we treat people, our own children, like horses to be goaded onward by a carrot or threatened with a stick? That is one of the essential problems we will consider over the course of this presentation. Also, what guides the free horse of the plains forwards in running? What makes them run so beautifully? Not a piece of sugar, and not a whip either, neither a carrot nor a stick, but simply the intrinsic desire, the intrinsic motivation to run. The central theme of my big board is the absence of intrinsic motivation in schools and the problems that it causes, as well as different educational reforms that we could undertake to solve the problem of the lack of intrinsic motivation. In 1990, John Taylor Gatto, a teacher in the New York City area, received the New York City Teacher of the Year award for his excellent work. In his acceptance speech, he mentioned many problems that he observed among public school students during his career. An indifference to the adult world. Gatto expressed his surprise because this tendency among today's children goes completely against the childhood desires of millions of years. When we think of children, we always think of them wanting to become a part of the adult world and of adult society. Then why on earth would a child spend all their day fooling around on YouTube and watching SpongeBob on TV? Why is there such indifference to the world of seriousness and to the world of genuine, productive work among children? The second problem he noticed is that children today lack curiosity, and what they seem to have is fleeting. It seems like the only times we can get a child to show curiosity is when we say, "There's a reward for you if you are curious about a certain subject, and if you delve into researching this certain subject." In other words, if we offer the child a carrot or a stick to get them to do something, then they show curiosity. But otherwise, they do not show the intrinsic motivation to learn about the world around them. Also, this is connected to the fact that children are required today to perpetually move between classes that have nothing to do with each other and a schedule which isn't connected to what's being learned. The bell to announce when to move to the next class doesn't ring when you've actually finished writing your poem. It rings at an arbitrary time. And as a result, many children don't have a sense that their work is something that could continue on over time due to intrinsic motivation. Today, children think of work as something that is regulated purely by bells, not by the inner force of intrinsic motivation within the self. The next problem he noticed is a poor sense of continuity in life. For instance, children have no sense of how the past causes the present and how the present influences the future. This is also connected to the problem of the school bells, and how it causes children not to focus on extending a given thought or a piece of work across a long period of time, but of switching rapidly from one subject to the next, and in a way that doesn't necessarily connect one subject to another. Children today live in a continuous present. The fourth problem he noticed was that children are very uneasy with intimacy or candor with others. He said that they have a shallow or fake sense of self, and that this is caused by, for years, having been told that the only way that they can get a purpose in life is to follow the carrot and avoid the stick. Do what gets good grades and the approval of adults, and don't do what gets the disapproval of adults and bad grades. As a result of following these extrinsic motivations, and not their own desires, and intrinsic motivations, children have gotten the sense that they can't have their own real self, but only a self that is appealing to others. And as a result, children want to stay away from close personal relationships to a degree greater than ever before, because when they get too close to another person, the disguise wears thin, and it becomes clear that they don't have an individual self. This is also the cause of a lot of school bullying. It's well known, at least it's suspected, that bullies do what they do to other children because of a sense of insecurity. This sense of insecurity could easily be caused by the lack of intrinsic motivation, the lack of individual identity caused by following carrots and sticks, prizes and punishments in schools. And the final problem that Gatto noticed was that children today tend to be passive when facing new challenges. They don't seek out challenges, they do whatever challenges their teacher tells them to face. This is highly connected to the lack of curiosity, because the curiosity to do something is what drives you to accept a new challenge. Here's a picture of me at 5 years old, going against all the problems that John Taylor Gatto mentioned. I picked up this book all on my own and read it. This is one of thousands of examples from anyone's childhood of intrinsic motivation winning out in a child's behavior. And as you can see, the intrinsic motivation guided me to do something productive, reading a book. Before we get to my service project, it's time to look at two fundamental causes of the lack of intrinsic motivation. A lack of self-knowledge, and also internalized grades. The lack of self-knowledge has already been noted by Gatto extensively, and Maria Montessori, the great educational philosopher, had quite a lot to say on the fact that children don't know their real selves. With her book, The Montessori Method, she explored in depth the theory of prizes and punishments in education, and how they misguide a person's sense of intrinsic motivation. She said, in essence, that the real punishment that people should be afraid of is not that of getting a bad score or a bad view from others, but the punishment is not doing what we were really meant to do. If I'm meant to be an architect and I choose to do something else, I am ignoring my own intrinsic motivation, and the punishment will come to me in the form of dissatisfaction with my life. She compared the condition of many school children in her day to the condition of many government clerks, whose work confers a great benefit on the nation, but who only ever care about getting a promotion or a pay raise. These clerks work at their desks all day, transmitting amounts of information from one paper to another. Does this sound familiar to any school children in the room? Do you ever get the sense that you are performing work that does confer a benefit on society, the benefit of learning, but doing it not because of your desire to learn, but because of a desire to get to the next grade? There's quite a lot to say about Maria Montessori's work. She'll be featured again in this presentation. Next, the sense of internalized grades. In the book, The Case Against Homework, the authors explore the theme that since the 1960s, the amount of free time that a child has had open to finding a sense of individual identity has shrunk drastically. And also in In addition, Alfie Kohn, another great educational researcher, researched the levels of cheating in various middle schools across the country, and he found that the greater a culture of honor, a culture of valedictorians, strong emphasis on grades a school had, the higher the amount of cheating in that school became. This is no surprise, he said, because when you teach a child that to get a good grade is the purpose of being in school, the child automatically assumes that anything is acceptable to get that good grade, even if, explicitly, parents, teachers, and administrators disapprove of it. The fundamental message of school today, through the excess of homework which takes over children's lives, and also the strong, strong emphasis on grades, is that grades are the purpose of learning, not learning itself. Now that we've looked over the two fundamental causes of the lack of intrinsic motivation, the lack of self-knowledge and also internalized grades, which is like a false substitute for self-knowledge and intrinsic motivation, it's time to look at certain ways that exist of solving these problems in education, the problem of the lack of intrinsic motivation. Many thinkers have come up with detailed methods of making children learn for the sake of learning in schools. To begin with, the article, The Building Blocks of a Good Pre-K, starts at the very beginning of education, pre-kindergarten, and looks at how state tests in third grade have filtered down through the grades all the way to pre-K and mean that currently, in many schools across the country, pre-K children are learning how to prepare to take tests. They aren't learning how to socialize with other children. They're spending more time learning how to fill out bubbles and how to learn what the state wants them to learn. This is not right. Play in pre-K ages of children has immense positive effects. It teaches children how to socialize with others in ways that are acceptable. It teaches a child spatial and construction skills, like you learn playing with blocks. It teaches children the beginning of learning the joy of reading by allowing children the time to read independently. In short, play has many benefits. The first part of a good system of education that encourages intrinsic motivation is to allow the child to do what they want without coercion. That is the essence of a form of education that tries to grow intrinsic motivation. Maria Montessori is without doubt has the most complete plan for how to educate children. Her form of education, which is quite famous, consists of putting children in an environment full of educational objects, things that are fascinating to play with and that can be used to teach them valuable lessons, like geometric shapes, for learning the fundamental shapes of geometry, toys that can teach the child letters and so forth, and a whole variety of other objects in the classroom that can be used by the child to teach themselves and have fun at the same time. The essence of a Montessori classroom is that the child is not coerced with grades or with the effort of any teachers to do anything. If a Montessori teacher notices that if a Montessori child comes up to a Montessori directress and says, "Will you help me play with this?" then the teacher will help the child understand the object and will interact with them. But if a child is peacefully playing with their own set of blocks or other educational object, the teacher will not interfere. And over the course of running her system of schools, Maria Montessori found that the children don't get restless and naughty at all when you leave them to their own devices. Instead, they don't bother each other, and they spend all day, every day, quietly learning in their own corners of the room, and gradually increasing various skills like reading, writing, speaking, so forth, by doing so. The problem is that even though Maria Montessori came up with a system of education for people in middle and high school, her systems there are very, very far from being adopted by this country, so we have to look to other educational thinkers for ways of increasing intrinsic motivation in schools. For example, Marva Collins was a great Chicago educator who came up with her own system of education based on the Socratic method. For example, she would teach language arts by handing out to the class readings which contain abstract ideas that the process of thinking about will encourage a child to develop their reasoning skills. She will lead the class through these reading selections and will then ask members of the class certain intense questions about the content, meaning, and implications of the reading. If a child does not give a response to a question that is backed up with reasoning and also with evidence from the source itself, she will ask more questions to get the child to show their own reasoning. The whole purpose behind teaching language arts, and in fact every other subject this way, is to grow within the child the pride of knowing how to reason, and not just the ability to bubble down the right answer on a test. What Collins rebels against is the one-to-one exchange of information between source and test bubble. What she acknowledges is the fact that children have to be taught to learn how to induce and deduce, how to use logic, basically, and to gain pride from doing so. Her mission to induce more reasoning in young children is highly connected to the goal of increasing intrinsic motivation by teaching a child that it is a pleasure to learn to reason and to do productive mental functions, like learn how to think logically. Finally, how are we going to solve the problem of the bell schedule and how it makes children move from one class to another in an order that makes no sense and doesn't connect any subject to any other? The philosopher Leonard Peikoff came up with an idea for how to solve this. In essence, it consists of reducing the list of courses that are available. The purpose of a school, Peikoff says, is not to teach a child anything and everything, but to teach them the essentials of life and the things that are most necessary for leading a functional life. Math, science, history, and language arts are his 4 essential subjects. How is reducing the list of subjects available in a curriculum going to increase intrinsic motivation? First of all, taking out fundamentally unnecessary subjects like PE or certain other subjects like music out of the school curriculum will be a way of ceasing to distract children from what's most essential to learn, and also reducing the subjects which a curriculum tackles increases intrinsic motivation because it makes more sense to the child by reducing the range of subjects covered. If a child can clearly see the relationships between different fundamental areas of knowledge, they will be more likely to enjoy thinking about those areas of knowledge and to follow their own inner forces in studying and working with those areas of knowledge. So in short, the recommendations I have for increasing a sense of intrinsic motivation in schools is to move toward a system of education that does not coerce a child to do anything. If we don't use prizes and punishments to guide children's learning in schools, then the child will be perpetually aware of their own inner desires to learn and be productive, and will not have their motivations twisted by a sense that they need to do something other than what they desire because of grades and parental and administrational disapproval. Also, to move toward a system of education which depends more on Socratic seminar methods. This should be very familiar to parents of flexies and flexies themselves, because such a method of education increases a child's ability to reason and also their pleasure in doing so. And finally, we should simplify the range of subjects presented in schools, basically so that the data which our children are presented with make sense as a whole, not just within each class. And this will encourage children to think more on their own about the subjects they're confronted with. So now, how does this fit in with what I did for my service project?